The whole day spent in a bench in the patio. There were the four idiot children of the Mazzini-Ferrà marriage. They had their tongues between their lips, stupid eyes, and turned their heads with gaping mouths. The patio was of dirt, closed to the west by a brick hedge. The bench was parallel to it, 5 meters apart, and there they remained still, eyes fixed on the bricks. As the sun hid behind the hedge, on its decline the idiots raved. The blinding light sparked their attention at first. Little by little their eyes cheered. They laughed strepitously at last, absorbed by the same anxious hilarity, staring into the sun with beastly joy, as if it were food. Other times, aligned in the bench, hummed hours on end, mimicking the tram. Loud noises also shook their inertia, and so they ran amok, biting their tongues and mooing around the patio. But they were almost always extinguished in a somber lethargy of idiocy, and spent the whole day sitting in their bench with dangling, steel legs, soaking their pants in glutinous drool. The eldest was 12, and the youngest 9. In all their dirty and helpless appearance, one could see the absolute lack of any maternal care. Those four idiots, however, had one day been the light in their parents' eye. 3 months into their marriage, Mazzini and Berta directed their close love as husband and wife and husband towards a much more vital future, a child. What greater joy for two lovers than this honorable consecration of their affection, now freed from the vile selfishness of a mutual love without any end and, what is worse for love itself, without possible hopes of renewal? So Mazzini and Bertha felt, and when the son came, 14 months into their marriage, they believed their happiness fulfilled. The boy grew, beautiful and radiant, until he had a year and a half. But by the 20th month, terrible convulsions shook him by night, and in the next morning he did not recognize his parents anymore. The doctor examined him with that professional attention that is visibly looking for the disease's cause in the parent's sickness. After some days, the paralyzed limbs recovered some sense, but all the intelligence, the soul, even the instinct, were completely gone. He turned profoundly idiotic, drooling, dangly, dead forever in his mother's lap. My, my dear son, she wept over that ruin of a firstborn. The father, dejected, helped the doctor out. You can be told, I believe it a lost case. Might improve, educate it as far as his idiotism allows, but no further. Yes, Mazzini nodded. But tell me, do you believe it to be hereditary? Regarding fatherly heritage, I already told you what I believed when I saw your son. Regarding the mother, there's a lung not breathing properly. Can't see anything more but a tough murmur of sorts. Better get her checked. With his soul destroyed by remorse, Mazzini redoubled the love for his son, the little idiot paying for his grandfather's excesses. At the same time, he had to console, support Bertha without truce, heart the deepest, for that failure of her young motherhood. As it's natural, the marriage deposited all their love in the hope of another child. This was born, and his health and clear laughter rekindled the extinguished future. But by the 18th month, the convulsions of the firstborn repeated, and by the next morning, he would wake up an idiot. This time, the parents fell in a deep desperation. Their love was cursed. Their love, above it all. 28 he was, and she was 22, and all their passionate tenderness wasn't enough to create a single atom of normal life. They were no longer wishing for beauty nor intelligence as with their firstborn, but a child like all the rest. Of the new disaster, new flames of heart love arose, a mad desire to redeem once and for all the sanctity of their tenderness. Twins came, and, step by step, repeated the process of the older two. But, above their immense bitterness, Mazzini and Berta felt great compassion for their four children. It was necessary to extract from the limbo of the deepest animality not just their souls, but the abolished instinct itself. They did not know how to eat, change places, or even sit. At last, they learned how to walk, but they bumped against everything, not aware of the obstacles. When they were being washed, they started moving until their faces turned blood red. They only cheered up when it was time to eat, when they saw bright colors, or when hearing thunders. Then they laughed, tongues out, and rivers of drool, radiant with bestial frenzy. They did, however, have a certain faculty of imitation, but nothing more could be obtained. With the twins, the terrifying offspring seemed to have ended, but after 3 years, they again ardently desired another child, trusting that the long time that had passed had appeased fate. They had not satisfied their hopes, and in that ardent longing which was exasperated by their fruitlessness, they became bitter. Up to this time, each had taken upon themselves their share in the misery of their children, but the despair of redemption before the four beasts that had sprung from them drove out that imperious need of blaming others, which is the peculiar heritage of inferior hearts. They began with the change of pronoun, your children, and as there was insinuation in addition to the insult, the atmosphere became charged. It seems to me, Mazzini said to her one evening, having just come in and washed their hands, that you could keep the boys cleaner. Bertha continued reading, as if she hadn't heard. "'Tis the first time," she replied after a while, "and I've seen you worry about the state of your children." Mazzini turned his face slightly towards her with a forced smile. "Of our children, I think." "Well, of our children. Do you like it that way?" She raised her eyes. This time, Mazzini spoke clearly. "I don't think you're going to say that I'm to blame, are you?" "Oh, no." Bertha smiled, looking very pale. "But I ain't either, I suppose." "Of course not," she murmured. "Of course not." "If anyone's to blame, it's not me. Understand that. That's what I wanted to tell you." Her husband looked at her for a moment with a brutal desire to insult her. "Let's leave it there," he said, finally drying his hands. "As you wish. But if you want to say, Bertha, as you wish." This was the first clash, and others followed, but in the inevitable reconciliations, their souls were united with double passion and madness for another child. Thus, a girl was born. They lived for 2 years in anguish, always expecting another disaster. Nothing happened, however, and the parents put all their indulgence into her, which took the little girl to the extreme limits of pampering and bad upbringing. If Bertha had always looked after her children in recent times, when little Bertha was born, she had almost completely forgotten about the others. The mere memory of them horrified her, as if she had been forced to commit something atrocious. Mazzini, though to a lesser degree, was in the same boat, but peace had not come to their souls. The slightest indisposition of their daughter now brought out, with the terror of losing her, the resentments of their rotten offspring. They had accumulated bile for a long time, so that the glass would not be empty, and at the slightest contact the poison would spill out. From the first poisonous disagreement they had lost respect for each other, and if there is anything that a man feels himself drawn to with cruel friction, it is when he has already begun to humiliate a person completely. Before, they had restrained themselves by the common lack of success. Now that this had arrived, each one, attributing it to themselves, felt the infamy of the four monsters that the other had forced to create even more. With these feelings, there was no longer any possible affection for the four older children. The servant dressed them, fed them, put them to bed with obvious brutality. They were hardly ever washed. They spent almost the whole day sitting in front of the fence, abandoned to any remote caress. Thus, little Bertha turned 4, and that night, as a result of the sweets that it was absolutely impossible for her parents to deny her, the child had some chills and fever, and the fear of seeing her die or become an idiot reopened the eternal wound. They hadn't spoken for 3 hours, and the reason was, as almost always, Mazzini's heavy footsteps.
My goodness! Can't you tread lightly? How many times?
Well, I forget, that's it. I don't do it on purpose. She smiled disdainfully.
Now I don't believe you that much.
Neither I would have believed you that much, you little weakling.
What? What did you say?
Nothing!
Yes, I heard something from you. Look, I don't know what you said, but I swear to you that I prefer anything to having a father like the one you had.
Mazzini turned pale. At last, he muttered through clenched teeth. At last, Piper, you said what you wanted!
Yes, Piper, yes. But I had healthy parents, you hear? Healthy ones. My father didn't die of delirium. I would have had children like everyone else. Those are your children, all 4 of yours.
Mazzini exploded in turn. Consumptive Piper! That's what I told you! That's what I want to tell you! Ask him. Ask the doctor who is more to blame for your children's meningitis. My father or your punctured lung, Piper. They continued with increasing violence until a moan from little Bertha instantly sealed their mouths. At 1 in the morning, the slight indigestion had disappeared, and as inevitably happens with all young couples who have loved each other intensely even once, the reconciliation came, all the more effusive because the grievances were hurtful. A splendid day dawned, and as Bertha got up, she spat blood. Emotions and a bad night had, without doubt, been largely to blame. Mazzini held her in his arms for a long time, and she cried desperately, but neither of them dared to say a word. At 10 o'clock they decided to go out after lunch. As they had little time, they ordered the servant to kill a hen. The bright day had driven the idiots from their bench. So, while the servant was cutting the animal's throat in the kitchen, bleeding it slowly, Bertha had learned from her mother this good way of keeping the meat fresh. She thought she felt something like breathing behind her. She turned around and saw the 4 idiots, their shoulders together, staring stupefied at the operation. Red.
Ma'am, the children are here in the kitchen.
Bertha arrived. She did not want them to ever set foot there. And not even in these hours of full forgiveness, oblivion, and regained happiness could she avoid this horrible sight, because, naturally, the more intense the raptures of love for her husband and daughter, the more irritable her temper with the monsters became.
Get them out, Mary! Throw them out! I'll I'm killing you!
The 4 poor beasts, shaken and brutally pushed, ended up in their bench. After lunch they all went out. The maid went to the city, and the couple went for a walk around the country houses. When the sun went down, they returned, but Bertha wanted to say hello to her neighbors across the street for a moment. Her daughter immediately ran home. Meanwhile, the idiots had not moved from their bench all day. The sun had already crossed the fence, was beginning to sink, and they continued to look at the bricks, more inert than ever. Suddenly, something came between their gaze and the fence. Their sister, tired of 5 hours of paternalism, wanted to look for herself. Stopping at the foot of the fence, she looked thoughtfully at the crest. She wanted to climb, there was no doubt about that. At last, she decided on a chair with a torn bottom, but there was still more to go. Then, she resorted to a kerosene box, and her topographical instinct made her place the piece of furniture vertically, with which she succeeded. The four idiots, their gaze indifferent, watched as their sister patiently managed to master her balance, and as she stood on tiptoe, resting her throat on the crest of the fence between her stretched hands, they saw her look around and seek support with her foot to raise herself higher. But the gaze of the idiots had brightened. The same insistent light was fixed in their pupils. They did not take their eyes off their sister, while a growing sensation of bestial gluttony was changing every line of their faces. Slowly, they advanced towards the fence. The little girl, who had managed to get her foot in her place, was already about to mount it and surely fall on the other side, felt herself caught by the leg. Below her, the 8 eyes, fixed on hers, frightened her.
Let me go! Let me
She cried, shaking her leg, but she was drawn.
go back! Back!
She cried imperiously. She tried to hold on to the edge again, but felt torn away.
Back!
She could not scream anymore. One of them squeezed her neck, pushing aside the curls as if they were feathers, and the others dragged her by one leg to the kitchen, where that morning the hen had bled to death, taking its life second by second. "I think she's calling you," he said to Bertha. They listened anxiously, but heard nothing more. Nevertheless, a moment later they said goodbye, and while Bertha was about to put down her hat, Mazzini advanced into the courtyard.
Child!
No one answered. He raised his voice, already agitated,
Child!
and the silence was so macabre for his ever-frightened heart that his back froze with horrible foreboding. "My daughter! My daughter!" He ran desperately towards the back, but as he passed in front of the kitchen he saw a sea of blood on the floor. He violently pushed open the half-open door and let out a cry of horror. Bertha, who had already rushed in, turned when she heard the father's anguished call, heard the cry and responded with another. But as she rushed into the kitchen, Mazzini, livid as death, intervened, restraining her. "Don't come in! Don't come in!" Bertha could see the floor covered in blood. She could only throw her arms over her head and sink down onto it with a hoarse sigh. I hope you enjoyed my reading of The Beheaded Hen by Horacio Quiroga. I felt this one took a much more somber tone. We are just getting started. If you want to recommend a scary short story, do so in the comments section below.
Also, we reached 100 subscribers.
After this, if you enjoyed, please consider leaving a like, a comment, or subscribing. You don't know how powerful your support may be. Thanks for watching.